Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, Em and Jay, and today the two of us are talking about the 4th issue of the Wonder Twins. The plot of this comic is the Wonder Twins going on some bad dates, which isn't the most compelling plot for a superhero comic. On top of that, it's very slowly paced. The dates don't even happen until halfway through the book, so it ends up being pretty boring. It also tries really hard to be deep, but it actually comes off as really shallow. They spend a lot of time rambling on things that I'm sure they think are very wise and smart, but instead it's obnoxious, like a lecture. So the comic opens on the school's science fair. Jaina presents her project, a solar-powered flashlight, to the judges, but they question how useful it would be, so they move on to the next student. While the concept of a solar-powered flashlight does sound pretty silly, it actually is a product that exists on the market. The logic being that you charge them during the day so they'll be ready to go when you need them. But my point is, this joke kind of falls flat because this is actually a product that does exist. So way to open strong, DC. The next student the judges talk to is Polly. They ask her what her project is and she says it's on the internet. One of the judges says this is edgy. I don't really know how this is edgy though. It's just the internet. What's edgy about it? Regardless, Polly starts explaining her hypothesis, opening up with, "as we all know." This is a clear indication that we're about to get a big exposition dump. A lot of writers do this when they want to convey information to the audience, even though the characters in the story already know this. It ends up being very awkward and unnatural. Exposition has its place in storytelling, but this is just one of the worst ways to do it. On top of its poor delivery, I don't even think this exposition was necessary. Polly explains that she has a hypothesis that the internet is alive and mimics a human brain, but it's currently in a sleep-like state and will eventually wake up. The judges are very impressed by this hypothesis, with one exclaiming, "crap in a hat," which is really gross and I've never heard that expression before. But is any of this actually a project? It seems more like just a hypothesis. What does she have to actually prove her theory? Say what you will about a solar-powered flashlight, but at least Jaina actually had a project. How are they supposed to give Polly a grade? She doesn't actually have a project. Polly says that if she's right, grades would be the least of their problems, but none of this actually comes up again, which is kind of disappointing because we spent all this time talking about technical mumbo jumbo, only for it to not actually have any weight on the story. Maybe they'll bring this back in later issues, but for this issue it's just filler, something to take up a page even though this could have been shortened to a panel or two. Zan is at the science fair too, and a girl walks up to him asking about Gleek. Still don't know how he can get away with bringing Gleek on campus, but the girl asks if he brings Gleek everywhere, and he says almost everywhere except places with health codes or on dates. So the school doesn't have a health code? She asks if he's asking her out and then gives him her number, saying she likes a man who isn't afraid to speak up for himself, unlike her last boyfriend. Word of advice, never go on a date with someone who brings up their ex. It's a big red flag. They probably got into some kind of argument and then she said it's over and he said fine, and then they both stormed off, and now she's thinking that she doesn't need him, she can get any date she wants. So she gives her number to any guy who mentions dating in passing, because that means they're available, and that's all she really wants right now. She says she likes a man who isn't afraid to speak up for himself, but really he was as indirect as he could be. Plus he's fumbling over his words while he's trying to respond. He's clearly caught off guard. There's no way this date's gonna go well. She's obviously not actually interested in him, but that's not something Zan would pick up on. Now Zan thinks this is an actual date, but in her mind she's either trying to make her boyfriend jealous or she's just trying to prove to herself that she can get a date. But the whole thing is pretty shallow and not really something I was hoping for from a fun superhero comic. If I wanted to read about messy relationship dramas, there's always young adult novels. So while the girls are packing up their things, Jaina starts lamenting that she hasn't had a date since she's come to Earth, but her flashlight falls off the table and breaks. A guy picks it up, introducing himself as Red, and starts flirting with Jaina. Jaina, this is the part where you're supposed to tell him your name. Are we just skipping over that? Okay then. He then invites Jaina out on a date. Jaina says that she has to work that night, but she might be able to make it work, but Red basically takes that as a yes. Jaina begs Polly to go with her so she'll have someone someone to talk to. Polly says she's not sure because she's working on a project, but they get interrupted by Zan. Jaina notices that he's swaggering, so something must have happened. Zan asks her to guess who has 2 thumbs, a pet monkey, and a date tonight, and she guesses Justin Bieber. Well, at least it's a reference from the 21st century this time. Jaina introduces him to Polly, and Zan asks if she wants to walk home with the 2 of them. She declines, saying that she does her best thinking on the walk home. Jaina wonders what Polly thinks about during all that time, and Zan suggests boys. We then cut to Polly, who's thinking about testicular cancer of all things. Get it? Because Zan said she was probably thinking about boys. Get it? We don't have a problem with sensitive material being covered by the media, but there's absolutely no tact or nuance to this writing. We get 2 pages of this. Polly isn't even the main character. They could at least incorporate her into the story better so she'll be a stronger supporting character and more interesting to follow. But Polly ends up passing a construction site, and some of the construction workers start catcalling her, even though, again, she's 17, and to be honest, she looks younger than that. This causes her to lose her train of thought right when she was on the cusp of figuring out the cure for testicular cancer. Where do we even begin with this scene? How would she even get that close to a construction site? Normally, they're blocked off pretty heavily. I guess these construction workers are on break. What, did they go get Starbucks and then come back in time to catcall her? And the things they say, sweet meat? Seriously? I'm not even sure what this scene is trying to say. This whole thing is in such poor taste, and it feels like the writer is punching down. You hear that, cancer patients? You were this close to a cure. Too bad for you. Was this the right way to deliver a message like this? Plus, construction workers catcalling is such an old stereotype. We've seen it over and over again. Construction workers really deserve a lot more credit than they get. They work very difficult jobs, and very dangerous jobs, and where would society be without them? As if this scene wasn't bad enough, none of this actually has anything to do with the overall narrative. This whole scene was completely pointless. The comic just stops the story for this really cringy and poorly delivered lecture. What a waste of time. Let's just get back into the story. Zan and Jaina are at their internship at the Hall of Justice, but the hall is pretty abandoned except for Superman. It turns out they're closed down for the night because the villains are having a mixer, so that means the heroes can get away from the hall and focus on some other problems that Earth faces. It turns out the 2 of them have the night off. Why did no one tell them this earlier? They didn't even have to come in today. Meanwhile, Philo Math tells his daughter that he's got a new job. He's obviously lying, but she doesn't know that. She asks if she can see his new lab, but he tells her no, mostly because there is no new lab. He tells her that she should hang out with some friends tonight. She's reluctant, but she says that there is a thing tonight, and her father encourages her to go without really asking more information. You might want to at least ask where she's going. But it cuts to the villains mixer. We get a lot of cameos from different villains, like Scarecrow testing his fear toxin and Professor Pig stabbing a guy in the stomach. That's never brought up again, by the way. It's in character, but still concerning. Also, the Malingerer is hanging out by the DJ. Why is he here? But we're actually focusing on Math and the Scrambler of all people. I thought he walked off last issue. I guess he went back to the Legion of Doom. He did have a seat on the board. I'm just surprised Lex let him back in. The Scrambler pretty much asks for Math's backstory, but the story we get seems to contradict the previous issue. He claims he was an employee of Luther's, a research scientist working on a project for Lex. However, certain unnamed governments decided they wanted this project for themselves. They tried to get it through Lex, but he was too untouchable, so they decided to go after Math instead. They attacked his home and killed his wife, and they would have killed him too, but he hadn't been home at the time. Polly ended up finding her mother's body, but this story seems to contradict what we were told in the previous issue. In issue 3, Lex said that Math owed him $10 million for a personal project. There was no indication there was anything tragic about this story. It was pretty cut and dry. Where did all this come from? As if the inconsistency in storytelling wasn't bad enough, when Scrambler asks him for his backstory, he starts by saying, "I already told you that," but he didn't. At least we didn't see any of that. Is this another way of saying as you know? Cause that's kinda how it's coming off. Jaina arrives to the venue hoping that Polly shows up so it doesn't get awkward, but it's too late for that as she realizes the place is filled with villains. One of the waiters asks if he can get her anything. She says no thanks cause she's just leaving, but it turns out it's actually Red. It turns out he has an internship, the way the Wonder Twins have an internship at the Hall of Justice, but his is apparently with the villains. He tells her he has to work the room, but he'll be back later, just as Polly arrives. She asks who Jaina was talking to, and she tells her that that was Red Flag. Polly says, you know he's a villain, right? You don't say. You know, his costume wouldn't be too bad if it weren't for the hat. Also, it could use some kind of symbol, like an RF. Jaina says that she doesn't think he's like the others, and that he's actually pretty sweet. Plus, he asked her out. But Polly gets distracted when she sees her father. She goes to confront him, heartbroken over the fact that he lied to her, and saying that he was the only person she thought she could trust, and without him she doesn't have anything. And then the narrative completely drops the mask. We don't see them again for the rest of the comic, despite the fact that this could actually lead to some pretty interesting storytelling. It's funny how we got multiple pages dedicated to Polly when she was thinking about stuff that was completely arbitrary and had nothing to do with the narrative. And now that we actually have some legitimate and interesting developments with her character, the narrative completely drops her. Why would they devote so much time to her thinking about testicular cancer and that really awkward joke about catcalling, and then completely drop a story about family betrayal? You know, I think this confrontation would have had more of an impact if they hadn't gone with the fridged mom. If this was all just a money thing. It could have been a storyline about how good people can be corrupted by money, and how short-sightedness can get you into a lot of trouble down the line. Maybe Polly could have been his lifeline out of it. But now with this fridged mom storyline, I don't have any respect for Philo. It's completely ridiculous that he's still working with Lex. He was just an employee. I'm sure Lex has tons of them. Polly's right. Why stick around after what they did to your wife? I don't see why that's a reason to stay. He just adds on at the end that he owes Lex money, but he never explains why. Is it because of that weird experiment he was doing? What was he doing? I'm more interested in that. But we cut to Zan on his date with Debbie. They go to this Olive Garden stand-in, and I swear these background characters look really familiar, but I'm pretty sure they're not supposed to be Lex and Philo. But Zan tells Debbie that he brought her there for the unlimited breadsticks, because he wants her to have everything in life, as long as it's unlimited breadsticks. Debbie says he's sweet, unlike some people she knows. Yeah, she's definitely using him, and he still has no idea. But after dinner they go to the movies, and they happen to run into her ex-boyfriend there. Zan says they should go say hello, but Debbie says they should just ignore him while she goes to get snacks. I know Zan isn't great with social cues, but this is a little weird even for him. Jaina calls Zan because apparently there was a problem with the mozzarella sticks, and Red isn't happy about it. We never find out what the problem was, but it seems like the comic is suggesting that he's going overboard. Might have helped if we had known what the problem was. Mozzarella sticks are nothing to joke about. She asks how Zan's date is going, and he says it's going great. Debbie's talking to her ex-boyfriend, and he believes that she's talking about him. Zan makes really uncomfortable facial expressions throughout this whole comic. It's weird because we haven't seen him do stuff like this before. Is this just how he is on a date? Cause it's kinda creepy. Maybe tone it down a little, big guy. You're probably gonna end up creeping all the girls out. The next page is a parallel between the two dates. Debbie looks really annoyed with Zan, even though he's actually not doing anything wrong right now. Honestly, girl, you're the one who asked him out. Why are you annoyed with him now? She asks if Trevor can sit with them. No, he can't sit with you guys. You're on a date with Zan. What's wrong with you? That is so rude. If you don't want to be on the date anymore, just tell him. You didn't actually want to go out with him in the first place, and now you're gonna make him be the third wheel? That's really gross, Debbie. Meanwhile, Red Flag starts talking about his exes on their first date. So yeah, this date's a disaster too. He's actually just bragging about his different romantic endeavors, saying that he's dated all these villains and it's nice to date a hero for once. He says he's been in high demand this year, but it just looks like he has commitment issues. Debbie's been manipulative from the beginning. At least Red actually asked her out and meant it, even though he's really blowing it. So Trevor joins them on their date, and the two of them are those obnoxious people who don't stop talking talking through the movie. Obviously, the two of them still have feelings for each other, which they admit to while she's on a date with another guy. That is so tacky. Also, these two panels at the bottom of the page are exactly the same, except for the popcorn and Zan's arm. Why not just have one panel? And then Debbie starts making out with Trevor while she's on a date with another man. Girl, really? And Zan is completely clueless to the entire thing. So basically, Zan is completely undateable because of how little attention he pays to his date. Meanwhile, Jaina and Red Flag are leaving the restaurant, and she asks him if he left a tip. He says he didn't with their poor service. I'm kinda surprised Jaina knows about tipping culture. Red suggests that the two of them go somewhere, but he doesn't tell her where. Oh, definitely no. Jaina says she isn't sure, and then Red starts poking at her insecurities, saying things like, when are you gonna get another chance with a man as edgy and handsome as me? It's not like you had men lining up, but you don't need men lining up, you just need one good man. Okay, we've clearly crossed a line here. It's over. Jaina looks like she might actually go along with this. Jaina, where's that confidence you had in issue 2 when you told that prison lady you didn't agree with her? But they get interrupted by Zan. Jaina asks how his date went, and he explains that she's basically getting back together with her ex-boyfriend. Red starts mocking him, claiming he got friend-zoned because he tried going on a date with a girl only to become her friend instead. That's not what happened. Zan starts lecturing about how this is basically the best possible case because they're only 17 years old and probably would have broken up in a few weeks anyway. So basically, don't date Zan. He doesn't care about your relationship at all and totally expects it to break off anyway. That's so insensitive. A lot of people marry their high school sweethearts. Why'd he even accept going on a date with Debbie if he wasn't willing to put time and energy into the relationship and wasn't expecting it to last? He's just gonna not put any effort into the relationship, and then when it doesn't work out, he'll move on to the next girl. How is that any different from Red Flag, who dated all those girls and didn't care when he left them? Zan isn't committed just like Red. Also, what's going on with Zan's chin here? Zan says that now he has a friendship that'll last for years to come. Looks like another win for Zan. He clearly thinks that he's a nice guy and this is eventually gonna pay off for him. Debbie isn't your friend. She never liked you, she used you. She and her boyfriend are probably gonna break up again, not because they're in high school, but because they didn't communicate well. And the comic treats this like it's so deep, like they really showed Red Flag. He's so proud of himself, but he cared so little for this date that Debbie was kissing another boy right next to him. I get he was watching a movie, but he was watching a movie with someone else. He should have cared enough about his date to know, but he fist bumps his sister, telling them goodbye and that he has to get back to his pet monkey. Red turns to Jaina and says that her brother is kind of a loser, even though he's probably really insecure about why he can't hold down a long-term relationship. Jaina actually agrees with him. Jaina, that's your twin brother. Red tries to ask Jaina out again to somewhere more secluded, but she distracts him by claiming there's a single mother nearby, which at first was kind of worrying. He's only 17. Luckily, he isn't actually interested in her like that. He just makes a rude comment. Sorry, it's just everything he said up until this point. And he made a reference to June Cleaver, but Jaina turns into a cheetah and runs off. But this probably won't be the last she sees of him. They do go to the same school after all. Plus, he is a villain. Wish we could have gotten more of that. Like, what are his powers and abilities? I mean, did this really have to involve superpowered beings? This was all just petty drama. This comic was a complete disaster. It wasn't even really a story. It was just a way for the writer to lecture the audience about what he thinks dating should be, which is really concerning. This was terrible advice. First of all, it's probably a good idea to know someone at least a little bit before you go on a date with them. That might avoid some of the problems that we saw. Of course, it's possible to be surprised, but Jaina probably could have found out that Red Flag is a villain and that he's been going on date after date. And what was going on with Zan in this issue? Other than the Thunderlust thing, I thought he was mostly harmless, but it turns out he's a total jerk. If he thinks high school relationships won't last, why is he even dating? He's the one who brought it up to Debbie, which is why she went on a date with him. Neither of them ended up getting hurt when it didn't work out, but that's just because they're both jerks. And it's kind of gross that the comic treated them both like they were in the right. Zan is praised for being such a nice guy, and Debbie is rewarded by getting back with her boyfriend. Then the comic goes out of its way to talk about catcalling by making cancer patients the butt of the joke. I don't think this comic had to be as bad as it was. Red Flag wasn't even a character. He was little more than a prop, honestly. Any message this comic is trying to send falls flat. Instead of focusing on a good and interesting story, they basically wasted the entire comic on cringy stereotypes and really bad jokes. But that's just our opinion. What do you guys think? To us, this comic is about as shallow as it gets. But let us know what you thought in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone! Bye guys!